Seth, be quiet. Okay. I'm doing live only because, and you need to be quiet. You don't need to be making those noises.
Yeah. But yeah?
I said be quiet.
Okay.
Alright, I am running behind, so I figured nobody cares if I fix some things while we're getting the stream started. Oh yes.
Alright, get in the car.
Okay, Mom just started screaming. On.
Hey, go find Facebook. Really? Hey, Cliff. Yeah, it's been one of those days. Want to make sure everything's working. Okay, that looks good. Anything interesting happened this week? I am totally and 1,000% unprepared for today. Like, this is awesome. Oh my goodness, can you take any longer? Just do it. Anyway, I'm trying to set up, but for some reason, Facebook is not showing up on my tablet, and I kind of need it to so that I can see if anyone is chatting with me on my Facebook page. Because Restream.io doesn't allow them to do that. So I don't have to feel guilty about missing it then? Because I would feel really bad. Okay. That's much better, sort of. We'll see if we can get that any better once my tablet decides what it wants to do. Ah, dang it. Sorry. Sorry, Muchly. Just pop this up. Okay. Let me know on Discord for sure. No, I didn't want to do that. Okay, so like I was saying earlier on somewhere, I have decided to switch over to Mansfield Second Ward because I really got burned out with Dark Mountain. like insanely burned out on Dark Mountain. And that's okay because that happens. You can only look at the same 80K words for so long before everything stops making sense, and and then you're like, I can't see what's wrong with this thing. So anyway, all right. So this one is going to be the first book in a series of books that I'm writing, that are, number one, rewrites of Jane Eyre novels, or Jane Austen novels. And they are also new adult genre, so kids between the age of like 18 to 24-ish. Although I kind of smudged that line just a teens because in the next book, in the one that I'm currently working on, they're just slightly older than that. But anyway, it's all within the context of the the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints culture. Not necessarily the doctrine, because that's something not totally different, but that's not what these books are about. These aren't like inspirational, confirm your testimony kind of books. They're books that tell about people's lives who are young, coming out into the world, either starting their career or just graduating from college. And it also puts it into into the confines of the singles ward. And if you don't know what that means, a singles ward is a congregation of people that aren't married yet. So they usually have the head of the congregation, sort of like the minister, his name is the bishop, and all those guys are married, kind of like watching over the unmarried flock, if you will. And then you've got and then everybody else is all singles. And of course the idea is that you put them all in the same place and they're gonna meet each other, and some people will get married out of it. And I attended a singles ward myself when I was in my early 20s, and I have friends that met their spouses that way. And but it's also to me a really interesting time in a person's life, because you have all this drama going on. People are trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to live the standards of the church, and people are people, and they don't always succeed at living those standards, and that's okay-ish. But really, the point of these stories is these are people that have a deep faith, but they're also struggling to make really, really important decisions about their future life, and they're really young. And of course, I say that because I'm like 40 plus. And, when I was like 23, I didn't think I was that young. Thought I was pretty darn old. But looking back on it, I really was young. And not that people in that age group are stupid or incapable of making those really life-changing decisions. It's just they don't have the benefit of experience a lot of times to temper inexperience with wisdom. And so a lot of people make mistakes, and those mistakes have consequences. And that's kind of where we're going with these stories. I also chose, and I hope this is clever, so you can tell me if it's not, but if it is, let me know. The series title is going to be Young Single Austins, because it's always, they always refer to the single people as young single adults. That's okay. I'm a cheeseball, whatever. Anyway, so the Young Single Austin series. So the first book is based, and the first book is fairly obvious. The title's Mansfield Second Ward. So if you're familiar at all with Jane Austen, it's Mansfield Park is this one is based on, and this one, I think my main themes that I wanted to kind of bring up about in this particular one is that you could be the most religious, the most doing as best you can to follow all the things that your pastor, your bishop has taught you. And when it comes right down to it, you find yourself doing things you never thought you would do. And I'm not necessarily referring to bad things, like, I'm referring to, so for example, Elle, or her full name is Ellen, but they call her Elle, and she has always been the goody-goody, like goody-goody. She always went to church. She always, did everything she was supposed to. Now she's in college, and she's getting ready to graduate, and her best friend in the whole wide universe is their across the street neighbor. His name is Nate, and the beginning of the book talks about Nate coming off of his mission. So in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, people, especially young people, usually have the option of going on for men it's 2 years, and for women it's 18 months. But they go on a mission to proselyte and to support the wards in other places. And so Nate is finally coming back from that adventure. And one of the things that is part of LDS culture, and particularly Utah LDS culture, is this notion that once you've served an honorable mission, that now it's time to get married. Whether that's good or bad, it's really kind of not the point. The point is that that's sort of an expectation. And so, these young men, they get home, they are trying to restart their whatever they were doing before they went on their mission. So they have they'll have like trying to get back into college, or maybe they'll join the military, or maybe they'll just start working right off the bat. And then their next step in the progression of the plan of happiness would be to find their eternal companion. And that's a lot of stress for a guy, I mean, obviously the girls have that same expectation too, but I think it's more of a burden on the young men than it is on the young women. We won't be discussing feminist, sexist attitudes. It's just how it is. Because I could go on and on about that, but I won't. So anyway, so Nate's come back from his mission. Elle is really excited to see him, and forever and always before his mission, they were like peas and carrots, if you will, if I can borrow a phrase from Forrest Gump. And their relationship had always been very platonic. You know, there was a lot of care between the two, but it was more along the lines of brother-sister, because they'd pretty much grown up with each other. And now, but now that he's back from his mission, things have changed. And it's not a real obvious change, at least not to Elle at first, because, you know, all the things that she feels like she would like in a husband, and she's not necessarily putting that on Nate right away, is that he's kind of her, you know, exemplar. He's the one that represents everything that if she's going to marry somebody, that's the kind of guy she wants. But it doesn't really register for her at first that he may not necessarily be entirely an exemplar. She may actually want him. Be that as it may, one of the biggest things that happens in the very beginning of the book is that as soon as he gets off his mission, like pretty much the next week, as she's helping him register for college, he meets somebody. So you can imagine Elle's confusion, her irritation. At first it was more like, hello, you just got back from a mission. Shouldn't we be hanging out for a little while before you go off and find somebody? But the reality of the situation is that's not always how it works out. And then of course through the progression of the novel, she realizes that it's not merely the fact that they always cared for each other more than the normal male-female friendship, that all of a sudden now they're dealing with emotions that go beyond that. And that leads into my second theme, which is when we are dealing with young people, especially young unmarried people, and in my church, the expectation is that there is no sex before marriage. And of course, we all know that that doesn't necessarily work out like that all the time for people. Okay. What? Yeah. Save some rice for me if you got rice.
No, it's fine.
Anyway, but you've got these people that really want to work hard at following these commandments, and when you're dealing with young people with, we're talking fully developed bodies and hormones and, you know, all the things that are young people, you start to understand your own self, basically, is what I'm getting at. So Elle has always been the goody-goody, and now all of a sudden, in comes Tucker. Tucker is this kid from Texas. He's devastatingly beautiful. He's that roguish kid that flirts with every girl that he comes across, and every girl would fall at their feet to be with him, except of course Elle, who then of course he really likes her because she's not constantly like dying over him, basically. So you've got Tucker coming in, and Tucker in a way is representative of Elle discovering herself as not just a young person, but as a sexual being. Now, obviously, I'm not going to sit there and be all like, there's not going to be a bunch of raunchy sex, because that's not the whole point of this thing. But the point is that sometimes when you've led a fairly sheltered life. Um, the idea of you expressing that with someone, expressing those sexual feelings to someone, can be a little intimidating because you don't want to fall off the edge totally, but it is kind of fun to make out with people. Just gonna say it. So Tucker is Elle's opportunity to not only explore what her wants and desires are, and also to show how unprepared she is for basically adult life. She's kind of been living as she's always had in high school, and now all of a sudden there's some really adult things happening in her life. Tucker chasing her, Nate dating somebody else that she's not okay with, not necessarily at first the person necessarily, but the idea that now she has to share Nate with someone else, and that doesn't fly very well. So we've got all these things going on, and then at the end, I'm trying really super hard to make sure that the transition from, because obviously we're going from friends to lovers, this particular genre, and so I wanted that to happen in a very natural sort of, almost like the light clicks on in your head kind of progression. So, yes. So there's, and it has to be Nate as well, because, obviously Elle starts to realize that she has feelings for Nate beyond just like a brotherly type figure, and so she has to come to terms with that, as well as trying to come to terms with the fact that he's in love with somebody else. And Nate has to come to the realization that Elle is a lot more important to him than he originally imagined, and that their caring about each other goes beyond just merely friends. And that is kind of where the arc goes right now, is that Nate starts to realize, even though Nate's the one that's insisting that Elle date Tucker, because it kind of makes Nate feel just a teens less guilty for dating this other girl and kind of ditching Elle. But I think it kind of backfires on him, and it's like, oh, by the way, I actually do have feelings for you, and I don't know how to reconcile that with this other person that I started dating and have fallen in love with. So, at this point in the story, I thought I was pretty much done with this particular book. and I haven't really looked at it for probably around a month. And I've realized that I have a lot of fleshing out to do. I've got the really good bones of a story, but for some reason it's not as fleshed out as I wanted it to be. And so this particular scene is actually quite long. This starts out at the beginning of church on Sunday, and Tucker's trying to text flirt with Elle, and it's not going over very well for him because she's trying to be good and pay attention, and he's being a distraction. And not only that, but now this is at the point where, Elle looks over and Nate is holding Sophia's hand. And that is code. I don't know if it's just merely LDS culture or not, but it definitely, in the singles ward, you hold someone's hand, that's code for you are dating. That means you can't go up to that guy and flirt with him anymore because he belongs to her, right? It's so silly, but it's true. So she sees them holding hands. She's like, okay, that takes care of that idea. Um, and now she's got to deal with Tucker because in some wards, not every one of them, and probably not so much anymore now. I know when I lived in Dallas, the fast Sunday or the first Sunday of the month, they always had what they called a linger longer, which was whoever's ward was the last service of the day would have sort of like a potluck dinner after the service. So church would end and you would go eat something. And so a lot of singles wards do that too. It's an excuse to just hang out outside of the normal block of preaching and talks and things. And so now she's driven with Nate, and now she's kind of stuck because now she has to sit and watch them flirt with each other the whole thing, and she's still fighting her attraction to Tucker. So let's see. So this is where I think Elle is really starting to realize that she's still annoyed by Nate, or not Nate, by Tucker, but I think now she's starting to realize that even though he may be, her annoyance with him isn't really about him, it's about her, and she doesn't want to like him. Does that make sense? She doesn't want to like him at all. And so this is kind of the first scene where we see where she's starting to reevaluate that whole idea. And so let's see. Once the meeting was over, Sophia, Nate, and she got up to go to Sunday school, which is another block of religious discussion after the main service. Elle looked around the chapel to see where Tucker had been sitting. Seems he had gotten quite cozy with the smiley blonde near the back. He was so intent on their conversation that he didn't see them pass by. Elle tried really hard not to roll her eyes. If she was being extremely honest with herself, there was a part of her that liked the attention she got from Tucker. But it wasn't in his nature to stick around with one person for any length of time, and his chatting it up with the blonde was proof positive of that. Elle had to focus extra hard on the lesson so that she wouldn't catch herself looking around to see if Tucker had made it into the classroom. I don't care, right? She thought. He's just another one of those chasers. You knew that from the beginning. You're an idiot for even wondering if he's in the classroom because you don't care. It's always great to lie to yourself, right? As Sunday school announcements were being read, she felt someone flick her ponytail. Hi, Tucker whispered. Hi, Elle whispered back. Miss me? He asked. Can't miss you if you never go away, she said. Aw, you don't mean that, he said. He had leaned all the way forward so that his breath tickled the back of her neck. What about linger longer? Did you ask Nate about it? No, he was too busy paying attention to the talks, she said. Or no, and I think I meant her, as in I was too busy. Let's fix that right now. I was too busy paying attention to the talks, she said. You really are a goody two-shoes, he said. You say that like it's a bad thing. I can overlook it because you're such a tease. A tease? She exclaimed a little louder than she intended. Shh! Some of the people hissed at them. Yes, a tease, he said. I know you like me, admit it. You like me so much you want to go on another date with me. Come on, I'll drive you home and we'll talk about where to go. No, I'm too busy, she said. Finals. Don't you ever take a break? Don't you ever give up? Not really, he said. Mark of a good salesman. I know when I see a sure thing. Elle turned her body to be able to look Tucker in the eyes. His face wasn't teasing at all. I'll consider it when I'm done with finals, she said. I knew you couldn't resist saying yes, he said, smiling. I didn't. I said I'd consider it. Right. It wasn't a no. She turned around to face the front of the classroom again, her cheeks blazing. She snuck a peek at Nate to make sure he hadn't seen anything. His smirk and nod to her told her he'd seen everything. Let's see. When class was over, Ella had to reach over Sophia to tap Nate on the arm. Are we staying or are we going? What do you want to do, Sophia? I think we should stay, she said. We had these at our branch in Dallas, and they were always so much fun. That's one vote for staying, Nate said. I vote for staying as well, Tucker said. Honestly, I don't care either way, Elle said. So if you want to stay, then let's stay. Good, Nate said, taking Sophia's hand. Let's eat. Tucker waited politely for Elle to start walking towards the gym. Nate turned around right as they were about to enter. Let's get rid of that, the gym. Oops. Hey, Elle, I was wondering if you'd catch a ride with someone to get home. What's up? She said. I was hoping to drive Sophia home, he said. Elle looked over at Tucker, whose face was a mask of angelic neutrality. Sure, she said. Don't worry, Nate, Tucker said. I'll make sure she gets home. She can pay me the $5 she owes me when we get there. Nate looked at them in confusion, but didn't get a chance to ask because Sophia was pulling him towards the buffet line. The smell of food hit her nose and her stomach growled. Tucker looked about to say something to her when Aaron approached him. Tucker, could you tell that story that had me laughing so hard I was snorting, please? He allowed himself to be pulled away. Elle sighed, somewhat in relief. She got her food and sat down with Nate and Sophia. She heard a chorus of female laughter coming from the other side of the room. She looked over, and there was Tucker surrounded by at least a half-dozen girls. What he said was apparently funny because the girls all tittered in delight at whatever it was he said. Elle rolled her eyes. So when is finals for you, Elle? Nate said. Next week, Elle said, and thank you for your help on that paper. I got a 95% on it. Awesome, good job, he said. I can't believe we'll have only 3 weeks until we start school. He smiled at Sophia. Already using we, huh, Nate? Elle thought. Oh, Sophia, did you finally decide on your major? Elle asked, trying not to grit her teeth as the laughter erupted behind them again. I think I'm going to just say undecided for now, she said, glancing over at Nate. Yeah, you mean your MRS degree, Elle thought. And if you don't get that, it's for Mrs. She's looking to get married. Meaning she doesn't want to have to finish her education because she'll just let her husband do that. Elle took a deep breath while Nate and Sophia talked. She was getting irritated over things that should have just rolled off her back. It seemed everyone in the room was intent on irritating her. She stood up and took her plate and threw it away. Avoiding anyone that might want to get at her involved in a conversation, she made her way to the foyer. She paced. She needed to calm down. Are you ready for that ride now? Tucker said as he sauntered into the foyer. Maybe, Elle said. You look annoyed, Tucker said, with a crooked grin on his face. She glared at him. Probably because I am. I have finals this week. Christmas is coming up, and someone tried to text me throughout sacrament meeting when I was trying to listen. In my defense, I only tried texting you through the first talk, he said. I was trying to see if you wanted to go have dinner somewhere downtown and look at the lights at Temple Square, he said, as he crossed the area and sat down next to her. But I understand you're busy. How about a rain check? Elle sighed. It took a lot not to shoot daggers at him with her eyes. Why wouldn't he just give up? I think I'm ready to go home now, she said. Once they were on their way to her house, he looked over at Elle. Want to talk about it? Not really, Elle said. In reality, there's not much to talk about. I'm under a lot of stress with everything going on, and there's this guy at church who is very insistent, even though I've told him I can't do much of anything right now. Do you need me to talk to him? Tucker said. Elle rolled her eyes. Why don't you pick from one of your harem and take her out? Harem? Tucker said. Hi, bud. Harem? Tucker said, trying to drive and laugh hysterically. Do I expect a little jealousy from you? No, Elle said. It's immaterial to me who you date, Tucker. I'm not your girlfriend, so you're free to date whomever you want. Which happens to be you at the moment, Tucker said, grinning. They pulled up to her house. For the moment, Elle said. Wait, what? Don't pretend you have no idea what I'm talking about. Actually, I don't. You love the chase, Elle said. That's how your kind of guy operates. You chase until you get the girl. You get what you can from her, then when she's boring, you throw her away. I've seen it a million times. I'm not interested in letting you chase me until you get bored of me just so you can throw me away. Tucker's face went from amused to hurt. Elle held her breath. She knew instantly she'd gone too far. It may not have made any of it less true, but she should have had a bit more decorum. Tucker, I don't, Elle, he said. I hear you loud and clear. Have a good rest of your Sunday. Elle got out of the car and watched as Tucker drove away. Not that. Once he was out of sight, she leaned against the front door frame. The snow had stopped falling, but there was still snow on the front steps, where she normally liked to sit. She bowed her head. She spent a long time replaying the conversation in her head. She tried to think of a way she could have said what she meant without coming across like a jerk. Footsteps announced the arrival of Nate. Everything okay? He asked. No, Nate, she said. Your best friend is a huge jerk. I called Tucker a player to his face, and I think I really hurt his feelings. Nate put a hand on her shoulder. Yeah, you probably did. Would it help if I had Sophia talk to him? No, it's something he should hear from me, but I doubt he wants to talk to me right now. So, let's see. So yeah, Elle's got a little bit of a temper. She's got a little bit of snobby girl syndrome, if that's what you want to call it. I think, and I don't think I executed that insult quite hard enough. So I may have to figure out a way to change that, because it's kind of one of those things where you say something, like, you know how you've always wanted to zing someone, like just punch them in the gut right at the right time, and that's what I wanted to do with this scene, was just really get across to Tucker that not only does she not want him pursuing her, but that she kind of despises the kind of guy he is. And so I may have to reword that whole situation. In fact, what I may do, let's do this. Let's highlight that part. So then that way, so let's add insult to injury with the next step. So, I'm not even going to go there right now. So let's add insult to injury to this whole situation. Nate encouraging her to date Tucker, Tucker being Tucker, and Elle being herself. And now we are going to stab the knife in just a little bit harder. So Elle sat on her bed reading a book, and that probably isn't very readable. Hold on. Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better. Okay. Elle sat on her bed reading a book. Finals were done, and she felt like she could breathe again. The Sunday after she had insulted him, Tucker had not shown up to church at all. She felt somewhat responsible for that, but regardless, he always had a choice to come or not, even if someone he didn't like was there. As she expected, Nate hadn't been around much. It was fine for the most part, but as it got closer to Christmas, she started to miss him. The doorbell rang. She hopped down the stairs and saw Nate standing on the other side. She pulled the door open and jumped into his arms. "I am so glad to see you," Elle said. "Seems like it's been forever." "It really has, hasn't it?" he said, laughing. "I can't stay away for very long. I promised I'd go with Sophia, I can't stay for very long. I promised I'd go with Sophia and Tucker Christmas shopping, but I had to stop by to invite you to a party I'm having at my house on Friday night. It's technically a Christmas party, but I just want to get a bunch of people together before the holidays, really low key. Can you come?" "That sounds like a lot of fun," Elle said. "There was something else I wanted to tell you," he said, barely able to contain his smile. I've been seriously contemplating something for a while, but I finally decided I'm going to ask Sophia to marry me at New Year's." The news slammed into Elle like a sledgehammer. It was all she could do to keep the smile on her face. "Do you think she'll say yes?" he asked. "Wouldn't that be something you'd know better than me?" Elle said. "I mean, if it was me, I'd say yes, but I wouldn't know what she would do." Nate looked at her. "Wait, you'd say yes if I asked you?" It finally occurred to her what she had said, and tried backpedaling for all she was worth. "Well, yeah, I mean, if we were dating, or I mean, all things being equal, who would I rather say yes?" "Stop," he said, laughing. "I know what you mean, and it was a dumb question, but for what it's worth, if we were dating, and if I had asked you to marry me, then you saying yes would make me extremely happy. How about that?" "That sounded way better than the word vomit I just did," she said. "No need to be embarrassed," he said. "It's me." Indeed, it was him. She looked up into his blue eyes and felt despair sink into a deep part in her heart. It was finally real. She was on the brink of losing him forever, and there was nothing she could do about it. She'd rather lose him to someone else and keep him as a friend than try to convince him to stay as he was and have him resent her. She couldn't help herself. She wrapped him tightly in a hug. "Whatever happens, she's extremely lucky to have you," she said. He hugged her back, resting his cheek on her head like he always did when she was upset. They sat like that for a while, a few tear droplets leaking from her eyes, and then before she pulled all the way, she reached up and took his head in her hands and gave him a lingering kiss on the cheek. She let go. "I'll see you on Friday," she said. Before he even left her house, she charged up the stairs to her bedroom. She curled up in a ball on her bed. She let the tears leak out of her eyes and onto her pillow. He was such an idiot. Why couldn't he see that? I'm not going to say a sexist remark in regards to that. Usually has to do with their gender. Anyway, yeah, and that scene was important not only because it showed that he would basically tell her anything and everything, but also because I think with her kiss on the cheek with him, that was kind of the first clue to him that there was something more going on than just her being friendly friends, if you know what I mean. So you've got two things going on. She finding out that she's about to lose Nate to Sophia, and then that he realizing that his mind, it's more not so much on a conscious level, but it's more his mind is waking up to the idea that, wait a sec, there might be something else going on here. All right, let's see. This, if you're not in the moment, is one of those scenes where anyone outside of what's going on in the scene will understand what's going on. It's that typical, we have a lot of stuff unsaid that we're not willing to say because it would change the dynamic of our friendship. But it also is the boiling over of those emotions when you know you're not going to get what you want in the end. And for Elle, it's not a question of whether she can have it or not. She loves Nate enough that she's going to support him in whatever decision he makes, without her interference, because I think she would feel really, really badly if she tried to interfere in his relationship with Sophia, because then she would never truly know if he ended the relationship just because she said so, or if because it was the natural progression of that particular relationship. So she's kind of between a rock and a hard place in this whole dilemma. For now, she's still resisting Tucker. She woke up Friday morning with a weird, achy headache. She tried to do her normal routine, but she didn't feel well. She spent most of that day laying on the couch, cycling through channels on TV, finally setting on a cheesy Christmas romance. She didn't really watch it because her head was full of what had happened between her and Nate the night before. She closed her eyes, feeling his tall, warm body enclosing her in his hug. She felt the pressure of giving that lingering kiss on his cheek. She hadn't given him or herself time to comment or analyze what she'd said and done. She had just done it because that's what she needed to do. By evening time, she was not feeling any better. She dressed in a chunky sweater, her favorite pair of jeans, and her unicorn slippers. Before she made her way across the street, she tucked a small box. Wow. Oh, now I get what I was trying to say. A small boxed Christmas present into her sleeve. The snow promised by the weatherman hadn't started falling yet, but she still held her jacket close around her as she ran across the street. She knocked on the door. "Elle," Mindy said, Mindy being Nate's mother and Elle's mother's best friend. So Mindy's sort of like a second mom. "Elle," Mindy said, enveloping her in a big hug. "I hope it's okay if I come a little early," she said. "Of course it is, silly girl," she said, bustling her inside. "You're welcome any time, you know that." Once in the great room, Mindy got a good look at Elle. "Honey, are you feeling okay? You look exhausted." She put the back of her hand to her forehead. "And you've a low fever. Are you sure you want to come tonight?" "I'll just sit on the couch next to the fireplace and stay out of everyone's way," Elle said. "Do you want anything to eat or drink?" Mindy said, opening the fridge in the kitchen. "No, thank you, though," Elle said, sitting down on the cushion closest to the fireplace, tucking her foot under her. "Here, at least take a bottle of water," Mindy said. "Let me know if you need anything else." So Elle nodded and looked into the flames. "Mom, is that Sophia?" Nate said from another room. "No, Elle came a little early," she said. "Come keep her company. She's not feeling well." Nate peeked his head into the room and saw Elle sitting near the fire. Mom wasn't kidding, he said, coming over and sitting down next to her. He put the back of his hand on her forehead. Elle, if you don't feel well, what are you doing here? Well, according to you, this will be the last Christmas where we'll both be single, so I thought I'd try and enjoy that while I can, she said, hunching down into her sweater. You sound so fatalistic, he said. We'll still be friends, remember? Elle smiled at his naivety. Oh, before I forget, I brought your Christmas present with me, since we probably won't see each other again until after the holiday. She pulled the small box out of her sleeve and gave it to him. I am the biggest jerk in the world, he said, holding the box. I completely forgot to get you one. It's okay, Nate, she said, laying her arm on top of his arm. My present will be seeing your face when you open it. Now, she said. He said. Duh, yes, she said. He opened the box, and inside he found a tie pin. It was shaped like Texas. In the spot where Dallas would be, a tiny diamond was embedded. Wow, this is great, Nate said. Too bad I'm not wearing a tie right now, or I'd put it on. Thanks, Elle. Technically, it's from my mom and me, since I don't have a job, but we knew you'd love it. Tell her thank you from me as well, he said. He wrapped his arm around her shoulder and gave her a quick squeeze. He pulled his arm back around to rest in his lap. They sat in companionable silence. Good. Can you hear me is the question, though. Because I totally forgot to see if, yeah, I got the sound going. They sat in companionable silence until the doorbell rang. Nate got up to answer it. Hi there. There was a pregnant pause, and then, with his arm wrapped around her shoulders, Nate escorted Sophia into the room. Elle beat you here, but this is great because now 2 of my most favorite people are in here. Hi, Elle, Sophia said, barely looking at her as she looked around the house. Is this your first time here? Elle said. Yes, Sophia said. You can tell your mom her home is beautiful. Yeah, I think she's on Facebook. You can tell me yourself, Mindy said, coming out from the back rooms. Hello, dear. I'm Mindy Norris, Nate's mom. Aren't you just lovely? Welcome. Thank you, Sophia said. Your warm hospitality reminds me of Texas. Elle tried not to roll her eyes. She folded both her legs under her and sat back against the couch. The small talk between Mindy and Sophia did not interest her at all. She was spared by arriving guests. Everyone, Mindy shouted, there is plenty of food and drinks, so make yourself at home. Shelby eventually arrived with James in tow. Shelby is Nate's sister, and James is Shelby's fiance. He made sure to go to everyone he knew to the party to say hello. And you're that girl from across the street, right? He said, shaking her hand. Elle. Right, Elle, he said. So looks like Milligan and Associates let you off the travel hook for the holidays, huh? Yes, it's great to be with the people that love me at this time of year. He pulled Shelby into his side. Truer words never spoken. The doorbell rang again, and Tucker walked into the room. He locked eyes with Elle for a moment, but chose to stay on the other side of the room. Elle couldn't blame him. Nate walked over to where Elle sat on the couch and sat back down next to her. Good night, you guys, Mindy said as she walked towards her bedroom. Don't stay up too late, okay? The noise of the gaggle of young people continued. She had not been feeling well to begin with, but she noticed as the clock ticked later and later that she felt even less well. But the fire in the fireplace was warm and inviting. Hey, Rob. And she enjoyed hearing the chatter of the people around her. Nate was wearing one of her favorite colognes, and so she sat contentedly breathing in his fragrance and absorbing the heat from his wool sweater. Oh, absolutely, she heard Sophia say. It's so very important to expect the man you marry to honor his priesthood. I mean, I know this is going to sound terrible, but I am very picky. I want to make sure the man I marry be one of the elect, like it mentions in Moses. That's how strong his testimony needs to be for me. But he doesn't have to be elect if his testimony is strong, Nate said. I know extremely faithful, hard-working men that have a deep testimony of the gospel, but they've never been in bishops or elders' quorum presidents. It should be as large an honor that your wife or your children view you as the patriarch of your home, an example of faithful honor and service, as it is being called to be the prophet or a general authority. I totally agree with you, Sophia said. I just wonder about those men that sit up on the stand during conference and think what wonderful examples of Christ-like charity and a model of honorable priesthood holding they are. They remind me a lot of you, Nate. I'm just a regular guy, Sophia, Nate said. All I hope for in this life is a comfortable home, a wife and kids who love me, and a job where I can help people help themselves. It's an honorable ambition, and I love that about you, Sophia said. With a college degree and your natural desire to help people, I'm sure you could find a job as a director of a charity or the head administrator of Child Protective Services, maybe even a private practice. How many people could you help every day when you have your own office? I think it would be enough for me to help kids like you see on Wednesday's Child find a forever family before they age out of the system, or help a family that hasn't been able to find regular work get back on their feet again while helping them find a job. Nate said, and if my family goes to church every Sunday, my future marriage remains strong like my parents', and my kids grow up to go on missions and get married in the temple, then I think the Lord will be well pleased with my example and faithfulness. Exactly what I'm talking about. The Lord expects all his young men to be examples for the greater world around us. We, his daughters, should be confident that should he, she, or her future children need a blessing from the priesthood, that it's readily available in the home. Every woman should expect that. At any time or place, the priesthood should be available to her. But what if he's not readily available in the home? Elle asked, still looking at the fireplace. For the first time that night, she could feel the warmth from the fire on her cheeks. What if your husband was in the military? Or what if he was active when you got married, but then you decided he didn't believe anymore? What if he died? I think those situations would be highly unlikely, considering I'd choose more carefully than marrying someone who could so easily let something as important as the gospel slip away from them, she said, smiling at Nate. I don't plan on marrying someone in the military or any other high-risk profession, so his dying would be unlikely considering our age. That's a nice thought, but nothing's guaranteed in this life, Elle said. For example, my father died when I was 10 years old. Sure, he was in the Air Force and flew planes, but he had done that for years without a problem. It's not like how you see on Top Gun, million-dollar airplanes crashing all the time. But all it took was one training exercise. He wasn't supposed to be in the air at all. The mechanics had just given the plane a thorough inspection the week before. He offered to show a simple takeoff maneuver to a new pilot. It was a beautiful sunny day in Las Vegas. Sudden desert gust blew through the negative pressure that pulled the plane's wing down, putting it into a fatal tailspin. In an instant, my mom, who had married the absolute best man, father, priesthood holder that she could have wished for, and lost any hope of being able to call on a faithful priesthood holder at any time or place. She felt tears threatening to leak out of her eyes, but she blinked them away before she continued. She was only 29 years old when he died, Elle continued. Not too many years older than us. She chose carefully a man who loved his family, honored his marriage, and was a faithful member, but it was all lost that day. What was she supposed to expect then? She felt herself really starting to get emotional. And we're going to get rid of that. Nate stood up from the couch and held his hand out to her. She got exactly what she needed, the love and support and tears of her best friend's family, her family, and all the other people in this area that missed the good man your father was. Elle took his hand and allowed herself to be pulled to her feet. I know you haven't been feeling well tonight. Can I help you get across the road? I'll be right back, Sophia. Elle felt the anger rise to her cheeks again as he guided her to the front door and helped her on with her jacket. She waited until they were outside and the door was shut before she pounced on him. Nice of you to dismiss me so I wouldn't embarrass your girlfriend, Elle said. Elle, that's not fair, Nate said as he hunched into his jacket. There was no way for her to know how he died, and a woman should expect to have a good and faithful priesthood holder in her home, but we both know that's not always the reality of the situation. That was going to be my point, but you didn't give me long enough to make it before you were shoving me out of the house. Nate sighed. I could tell you were getting emotional about it, and I know how you hate crying in front of people. I just thought it would be a good excuse so you could get out of there before you did something you might regret later. What? Educating a small-minded girl against her notion of this perfect fairy tale Mormon life she seems to have bought into? Nate looked at her surprised. What has gotten into you? Oh, please, me? I'm not talking about anything we haven't talked about before, Nate. No, but I never imagined you'd be so vehemently against anyone who wanted different things out of life than you did, he said. Especially Sophia. I thought you two were friends. It's not about that, she said. She can get married 2 months after meeting someone, have a baby every year for the first 10 years of their marriage, and faithfully attend church every Sunday as Relief Society president and her husband as the bishop, and it would be a good life for her, holding court over the ward. What upsets me is she's got this idea in her head that you, her bishop husband, in shining scriptures or something. Is that really what you want? To try and constantly live up to this exalted expectation she has of you? I think you should know better than anyone what I'm getting into. Or I think I should know better than anyone what I'm getting into, he said, getting upset. You haven't spent hours and hours talking to her. I have. So if anyone could be accused of being small-minded, it's you. I haven't met anyone like her. She's so full of life and fun to be with. When we talk, it's as if she understands me. I haven't had anyone do that, except you. She's a good, faithful member of our church, and we seem to have the same wants out of life. Hasn't the bishopric been counseling us to find someone who is strong where we are weak, but care for us anyway? As far as I'm concerned, she fulfills that counsel perfectly. I'm not sure I could do much better. Elle's gut clenched. Nate didn't stand up for himself very often, but when he did, he was dead serious. They stood glaring at each other as the snow slowly drifted to the ground around them. If puffs of frozen air hadn't been forming in front of her face, she may not have known if she still took breaths or not. Then she blinked. Good night, Nate, she said as she turned around. And walked back to her house. It was all she could do to hold the tears back before she got into her room. Shut the door and threw herself on the bed. So, that little scene where we have, it's kind of one of those things where you're mad because you're not really mad at the person. You're mad with yourself and the situation. It just so happens that you take that mad out on the people around you. And a lot of times, I think in a situation like that, it's really easy to not be honest with yourself or the people that are involved in the situation, and then discover that it's too late to express those feelings to that other person. And that's what I'm kind of trying to show, is that they care about each other. How that plays out, you're not really supposed to know yet, but they wouldn't argue like they did if they didn't care about each other. All right. So this next scene is actually probably this one is going to be interesting because Tucker is going to offer Elle an olive branch. He was really upset with her at the time. He's had a couple of weeks to get over it now, and I think it's because, see, Tucker's an interesting character, and I'm not even sure I haven't him entirely figured out, which is not a good thing, because I'm supposed to know everything about him, because it's important to be able to know your characters pretty much inside and out, because if you don't, then you can't, if you don't know your character inside and out, then you can't make their reactions to things realistic. And so far, what I've got about Tucker is that he is a player. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. He is a player. In any other situation, with any other girl, what Elle is saying is exactly what he would do. If she put up any resistance whatsoever, he would chase after her until she agreed to date him, and then he would date her until she was absolutely head over heels in love with her, and by that point there's no chasing. He already caught, and so then he dumps and moves on to the next person and the next girl. But with Elle, it's different. It's like, it's different but same. I think the part where I'm having problems with Tucker is that he really does care for Elle. In my mind, there's no question. There's something different about Elle that he hasn't come across in any other girl. Part of it, I think, is the chasey part, where she's kind of trying to shove him away, and he likes that. But I think it's partly maybe because I don't think he ever thought he'd succeed in getting her to come around, which doesn't necessarily explain per se why he ends up doing the things that he does at the end of the book. But I think it explains how, in the process of trying to get her to come around, that he ends up caring about her way more than he thought he would. That's, I guess, what I'm really trying to say. Is the young man, the lovable rogue, the guy that dates every girl on the planet, suddenly meets his match, and he's in over his head without realizing it. And so I guess in a way that would be sort of like a Han Solo scenario. He was attracted to her, she was feisty, she kept him on his toes, and I think before he knew it, he was in that hole way quicker than he anticipated. And I think that's Tucker's biggest problem too, is that once he got started and it took him so long to get her to come around, that he ended up really falling in love with her. Doesn't stop him from doing what he does at the end, but it makes what he ends up doing that much more not cool. So let's continue on, shall we? Elle had gotten my grammar. Elle got a text from Nate Christmas Day. It was his way of sending an olive branch, and by that point Elle wasn't angry anymore. She couldn't ever stay mad at him for long, even when she wanted to, so the text made her smile. She returned it, knowing that he was probably sitting either at his house with Sophia or Tucker. What?
I need some of your time real quick. Take a break.
Hold please.
When you set up the doctor.
Hold on a minute. I haven't paused it yet, or whatever. Okay. we're having an existential crisis over here, so I'm going to end the stream early this week and be a bit more prepared next week. So thanks for joining me, Cliff, and I'll talk to you later.